Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Faster Law webinar series. Today's episode is number 6, Advanced Faster Mail Training. So it'll be a good one. As usual, I am your host, Andrew Suter. I provide direct support for Faster Law, and so I'll be guiding you through the webinar today. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, I'm going to be holding those until the end, but you can just go ahead and type them into the chat box at the bottom of your window there, and I will get to them. At the end of the webinar, I'll go back and see if I can't just get them all answered there. I will also mention, I don't know if you guys can hear this in the background. My neighbor is snow blowing, so I apologize if you can hear that kind of machinery sound in the background. For those of you in warmer climates, we're in Nebraska. We do have snow. There's about a foot of snow on the ground out there right now. So pretty cold. I'm jealous if you live in like California or something like that. But so I apologize about that. I will also mention that for today's webinar, I am running, as usual, a beta of Faster Suite. So if you're running one of our more recent betas, you shouldn't see anything really of that vastly different. But if you're on our most recent stable version, which is from back in June, you may notice some pretty substantial differences with Faster Mail, and I would recommend updating to the new version. This latest beta is available on our website, fasterlaw.com/download. So definitely head over there and check it out. This is actually going to be like the final iteration of our betas before we release this as our stable version. So I've got a couple of rounds of testing left to do, but it should be just about completely stable. So hopefully we won't have any issues running it today. But let's go ahead and get into it. So again, today's episode is number 6, Advanced Faster Mail Training. And we're just going to basically cover kind of configuration, like settings for Faster Mail today, how to get it to behave exactly how we want it. So I'm going to start out by just briefly covering the basics, how to file an email, what happens when we do that, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. If you've never used Faster Mail before, the rest of this stuff will probably lose you. So I'm just going to really briefly cover that. But then we're going to go ahead and get into our settings. We're going to take a look at prompting settings, specifically when we want to be prompted to save sent emails. We're going to take a look at all of the settings on our message preservation tab in settings, kind of just exactly how to fine tune what happens when we preserve an email. Then we're going to take a look at customizing our Outlook organization. So all of those folders in Outlook in the Faster Suite folder, that's what that portion is going to focus on. And then the last part here is save plus new versus save plus new. Some of you may have noticed that we have a couple of places in settings where it says save plus new. So I'm going to cover the difference between those tabs and explain kind of how they relate to Faster Mail. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So I'm going to grab Outlook and bring it over here. So Faster Mail, just again for basics, essentially it's just an email preservation tool. We can take an email, we click the preserve button, or we'll get an automatic prompt when we send an email to preserve an email. So here's an email that I sent myself and then responded to. Stop emailing me. Was just kind of annoyed that I emailed myself, I guess. But you'll see up here we get basically a list of all the emails. So we have the email that I originally sent. It's the response that I am preserving, so we pull all of the related emails. We have all of the images from the emails, and then also attachments here as well. So we can choose specifically what to do with each item in the top right. What we're going to be taking a look at is how to configure the defaults for these settings so that we don't have to actually change any of this stuff. But if you want to change item or change settings on a per item basis, you can do that here by just selecting the item on the left and changing the setting there. We then get a preview of the email in the middle here. And we basically just select a matter down here and hit save. So actually, I'll go ahead and do that right now. Let's save it to this arson of 4 sheds matter. So when we do this, a few things happen. The first is the email gets removed from your inbox or your sent folder. It doesn't get deleted. It actually gets moved over to this Faster Suite folder over here. So there it goes. And now if I go over here to the client and the matter, we will see that the email that I just filed shows up here. So it just automatically organizes your inbox. Then also in Clio, which I actually don't have open. Sorry, give me 1 second here. In Clio, we do a few things as well. So if we go to arson of 4 sheds, the first thing we do is we create a communication for each email that's saved. Just because basically Clio's email filer does this, so we do it as well. But then on top of that, we also save a .msg version of the email to the Documents tab. So it's just a much more robust preservation. It's an actual email file that will open with Outlook. You'll have attachments still attached, images still intact, etc. And also, even though the attachments are still attached, we will then also extract them separately. So they go to a separate folder in the Documents tab or in the Clio Cloud Drive if you guys use Faster Drive. So the attachments get extracted separately so you can get to them either through that attachments folder or right through the email itself. So really all of that stuff happens just with the click of that one button when we're preserving an email. So again, that's just kind of like a recap of the basics of Faster Mail. So let's take a look at how to configure it. So I'm going to go into Faster Suite and click on Settings here in the top left. And we're going to take a look at prompting settings first. Our prompting settings are going to be here under the Microsoft Outlook tab on the left-hand side. We've got prompting and prompting exclusions. So this is going to basically tell Faster Mail when you want to be prompted for sent emails. So you send an email, it just pops up and says, do you want to preserve that? In some cases, we may not want that. So really the first part of configuring that is these three boxes here. This computer, this is just going to say emails that I send on this computer I want to be prompted for. Usually we would recommend having this turned on if you want to receive those automatic prompts. The next box here is non-Faster Suite devices like phones, or it could be another PC that doesn't have Faster Suite on it. I would say in probably like 70 or 80% of situations, we can probably turn this one on. And what it'll do is when you send an email from your phone or from another computer that you use that doesn't have Faster Suite on it, it'll actually prompt you when you get back to this computer. So you send an email from your phone, you go back to your computer, it'll say, I see you sent an email from your phone. Do you want to preserve that email? Really handy if you do a lot of emails from your phone. Now, there is a fairly common scenario here where this can actually get kind of annoying and we would want to turn it off. So if you have in Outlook other people's inboxes, so you'll see I have another user's email right here. If this is the case and you have someone else's email in your Outlook, you might consider turning this one off for non-Faster Suite devices, because then if that person sends an email from their phone, you will also receive a prompt on your computer. So it would just lead to redundant prompts. You'd get prompted when they send emails. Could get kind of annoying. So if you have, other people's mailboxes, consider just turning it off. Unless you would want to file their emails, then you could get prompts for it. But again, most of the time you can probably turn this on. The last setting here is other computers running Faster Suite. This one we turn off by default. We would recommend leaving it off because basically it's going to prompt you on every computer that you use for every email that you send. So if I have Faster Suite on 3 computers, I have a work computer, a home computer, and a laptop, Faster Suite's on all of them. When I send an email on one of them, I'm going to get that pop up on each computer. And if that's what you want, then that's great. Go ahead and do it. I would say most of the time we don't want that. So go ahead and turn it off and you'll just receive the prompts on the computer that you send the email for. I'm going to go ahead and leave those off. I actually don't work with, I guess clients and saving emails. So I don't need the prompts for anything. You guys can turn them on as necessary though. So the next tab here is prompting exclusions. And what this will do, excuse me, is basically fine tune that. So this is like what groups of emails we should get prompted for. This is going to be specific exclusions. So you'll see we have basically 3 windows here. The first one is don't prompt me to preserve emails if any email addresses end with one of the following. The next one is don't prompt me to preserve emails if all email addresses end with one of the following. So that's the difference, any and all. And then the last one is don't prompt me to preserve emails if the subject line includes any of the following phrases. So these are all, excuse me, different ways to configure specific exclusions. The first one here, if any email addresses end with one of the following. This is going to be for things like, you can see I have mom@gmail.com in here. If I use my work email for personal emails, I can just put some of my personal contacts in this list here. And if any of the people in this list show up on an email, we will not be prompted to preserve that. So, if I email mom@gmail.com, I'm sending my mom an email that's probably not work related, probably don't want to save that to Clio. Regardless of who else is on that email, I could have 10 work people on there and some clients, but if mom is on that email, Faster Mail is going to assume that it's not supposed to be preserved and not prompt you for it. So you can basically add in here, mom, dad@gmail.com, Uncle Bob, whoever in here, and then if they show up on an email, we won't get prompted. The next one here is for if all email addresses end with one of the following. So up here, we use pretty much the full email address, unless your family has like a domain that they use, smithfamily.com or something like that. You're probably going to want to use the full email address for the first one. But this one, we're going to be including domains. So don't prompt me to preserve emails if all of them end in one of the following. This is where we're going to add things like internal domains. So you'll see here, I have fasterlaw.com. If everyone on an email that I send has an email address that's at fasterlaw.com, I will not be prompted to file that email. Basically, this is telling FasterMail these are internal emails. So, I email a bunch of coworkers. We don't get prompted. You can add as many domains in here as you want. And what it will do is basically compile that list and compare every email on an email that you send to that list. And as long as every email on the email is in this list, you just won't get a prompt. So hopefully that I'm not like over explaining these things, but that's how these work. So any email address and all email addresses. Now this last one is a little bit different. It's don't prompt me to preserve emails. And basically what it's doing is checking the subject line. So this is a way of kind of manually telling FasterMail, I don't want to preserve this. By default, you're going to have automatic reply and out of office in this list. So if someone emails you, you send an out of office reply, you didn't send that email, we wouldn't want to preserve that. It's just going to ignore it. We can also add things in here, like let's say we wanted to just add internal in here. If we were to add internal like so, then when we go into Outlook and send an email, to whoever, in the subject, we could just type internal. It shouldn't be case sensitive, but I'm going to just capitalize it like I had it in there, and then we type our subject afterwards. FasterMail is going to check this list. It's going to check the subject. And if anything in the subject matches anything in this list, it's just not going to prompt you. So if you're sending an internal email, instead of adding a domain, you could just type internal in front of it, or anything that you want. You could say like, do not file. And you don't necessarily need these brackets. I just include them because it kind of indicates that it's not part of the subject. So you could use do not file or an abbreviation like DNF for do not file, anything like that. Really whatever you want. If it checks, or when it checks the subject line, if it finds that in there, it just won't prompt you. So again, a more manual way of filtering out those email prompts. That basically covers the prompting settings, though. Using those tools, you can pretty much fine tune exactly when you want to be prompted. So, I want to be prompted on this computer, but not for any of this stuff is kind of how you could set it. So let's go ahead and move on. And let's take a look at the message preservations tab is the next thing in our list. So when I say that, what I'm talking about is this right here, the message preservation tab on the left. This is, you'll see 4 tabs here. Outlook cleanup, we're going to cover separately, but these first 3 we're going to cover right now. Messages and attachments are virtually the same. So I'm going to cover messages more in depth and then just kind of relate that stuff over to attachments. A lot of the same settings, but just for, either messages or attachments. Then communications is some other stuff as well. So let's go ahead and start with messages though. So the first setting on this tab, forensically preserve the email. That basically just tells FasterMail whether you want to save the email as a document, as a .msg in Clio, so that you can get to it from the Documents tab or through FasterDrive. If you uncheck this, it will still create the communication. It'll still organize Outlook, all that stuff. It just won't actually create that .msg. Now, with that turned on, this right here is how we are going to name that .msg that we save. So this probably looks familiar if you've ever used any of our tokens before. We've got the curly brackets and a bunch of these tokens, and we can see what we can use by clicking this button on the side here. So I won't spend too much time on this because we've got this everywhere and you're probably fairly familiar with it. But basically we can just use all of these tokens down here to configure exactly what our file name should be. So it's going to be named date at time - description by default. You can change that however you want. You could add like sender and receiver. So date at time, John Smith to Jane Smith, subject of the email. Whatever you want, you can configure that here. And that's how it's going to name the files. Now, as far as the location to save those files, that's going to be this setting right here. By default, it's going to say emails, but you can add anything to this list that you want. So if you wanted communications to be a potential folder that you could save in, go ahead and check that there or enter that there. I'm going to check this box as well just to show you this. When we preserve an email, what this does, I'm going to grab one of these just promo emails that I've received that we are, someone's having some issues there. Where did my email prompt go? Did I click the button? There we go. So these promo emails I just used for examples for filing emails. So the folders, though, for these settings, basically it's going to configure what shows up in this dropdown. So by default, it's going to select whatever is first in this list, which is emails. And then if that's not the folder we want, we can click the dropdown to get a list of other folders to use. Now, in my list, I have emails and communications, but we have a bunch of other folders in here. These are actually our document categories from Clio. And the reason they show up there is because I checked this box over here and said, I do want to see those. So if you see a bunch of folders in there that you don't want to use, just come in here, uncheck this box, hit save. And then when you preserve an email, it should only give you the folders that you've actually typed in that list there. So you can configure this to show really any commonly used folders that you might save emails into. Right along with that, even if you don't configure these folders here, we can actually just type right into this box. So let's say for some reason I want to save this email into pleadings. I can just type that in there. It'll find or create that folder when it goes to preserve this email, even though we don't have it configured in that list. We can also do something like this, where we select a matter down here, and then click this browse button on the right-hand side. This will let me actually browse. It should just bring us directly to the matter that we have selected, and it'll allow us to browse existing folders in there. So I could say for this one, I want to save it to the correspondence folder, or drafts or something like that. We can just select the folder, and it'll populate that folder in here. You can also select subfolders and type subfolders in here using backslashes, by the way, if you ever want to do that. So that's what that setting is. And then you'll see the next setting here is the file name, which pulls from this first field here. So date at time dash description. This is where that'll show up, and it's actually naming that .msg file. Now, below that, we have also deduplication. Fairly straightforward. If someone else has filed the email, don't do it again. We're not going to create duplicate copies. So would be best to just leave this box checked. And then down here, we have just like common words or phrases that show up in email subject lines that we are going to remove from the description of the email up here. So if it says re or forward, we're going to remove that just so it doesn't clutter up the file name, that sort of thing. You can always remove stuff from this list if you would rather have the subject of the email show up exactly as it shows up in the email. But by default, it's going to have all this stuff in here. So this is the settings for the actual emails when we preserve an email. We also have separate settings for attachments. So let's actually go back to that email that I had filed before, which, if you remember, now it's organized into these folders over here. Here it is. If I pull up the preservation window on, let's actually do this one. It has the attachments. If I pull up this email preservation for something with attachments, this is where these settings are going to come in handy. So you'll notice that if I click on any of these things, we have separate settings over here for those. They're different than the email settings. So again, we can configure them on a per item basis just by selecting it here on the left-hand side. So you'll see we have pretty much the same stuff here. We have the description, the folders, those are going to function exactly the same way. The document categories checkbox, deduplication, words to remove from the file names, that sort of thing. The only real difference is this one right here. So preserve it if it's not an image, preserve it if it is an image. That's basically this version of forensically preserve the email. So what this is doing is basically saying, if it's an image, most of the time it's going to be something like this, a headshot or a logo. We probably don't want to save that stuff to Clio. We don't want to extract it from the email. But if it's not an image, it's going to be something like a PDF or a Word document that we probably do want to extract. So by default, we will preserve attachments, but not images. You can configure that however you want. And you can also change it right in this window by saying, oh, this image is important. I'll check the box next to that one to make sure I get it preserved. So again, most of the same settings as the messages tab. Let's go ahead and move on to communications. Fairly straightforward here. This is where we choose whether or not to create a communication in Clio. So first box, yeah, let's create a communication. No, we don't want to create a communication. The next box here is deduplication for those communications. Again, we probably want to leave that turned on so we just don't have a bunch of duplicates. The last one here is the one that I really wanted to touch on this tab. creating contacts in Clio if they do not already exist. So if you file an email from johnsmith@gmail.com, and johnsmith@gmail.com doesn't already exist as a contact in Clio, FasterMail will create it if you have this box checked. Now, when it does that, it's going to pull information from Outlook in order to create that. The reason I bring this up is if the information in Outlook is incomplete, you could end up with either duplicate contacts where you already have John Smith in there attached to that email address, but if the information is incomplete or not exactly the same in Outlook, you could end up with another John Smith contact with just that minor difference. Maybe in Outlook it's Jonathan and in Clio it's John. If that doesn't match exactly, it's going to create a new contact. So you could end up with duplicates. You could also end up with incomplete contacts in Clio. So if the information in Outlook is incomplete, if you don't have a name attached to that email address, then it'll create a contact in Clio for the email address, but it won't know what to pull from the name, so it'll show up as unknown for first and last name. So if you see any issues like that, where you have duplication of contacts, or you have a bunch of unknown contacts, that's related to this setting right here. You can always come in here and just turn it off. That really is the solution right now, is just turning off that contact creation so we don't end up with those duplicates created or the unknown contacts created. So if you're not seeing those issues, feel free to turn it on. Most people don't have those issues, but we do see it fairly often, so I did just want to point it out here. So anyway, that covers most of our message preservation settings here, at least the ones I wanted to cover. So let's go ahead and go back to our outline. The next thing we're going to look at is how to customize our Outlook organization structure. So the folders that actually show up in Outlook here on the left-hand side, Faster Suite. This is probably going to be, I guess we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about this here. So get ready for that. Anyway, all of these settings are going to show up under Outlook Cleanup here. So it's also under Message Preservation on the left-hand side, but it's this tab up here, Outlook Cleanup. So let's just kind of start at the top. So the first setting here is basically whether or not you want FasterMail to organize your emails in Outlook. So when you preserve an email, it's going to move it to Faster Suite. If you don't like that happening, you can just change this first setting and say do nothing. Some firms do this. Most users leave it turned on because they want to actually organize their emails, but some people prefer to use their own organization structure, which we're not able to emulate in FasterMail for some reason, one reason or another. Or they just prefer to have everything in their inbox, so they have just like a whole view, a full list of everything that they have. It's really up to you. Again, most people are going to leave organization turned on, but if you don't like it, none of this stuff is going to apply to you. You can just set it to do nothing. However, assuming that you do want your emails organized in Outlook, the rest of these settings are going to basically customize exactly how that happens. So let's start with this first one here. So save it into the following folder. This probably looks familiar if you use FasterDrive, because it's just exactly the same as the setting that we have here for our Matter organization. So they are independent of each other, so we can set them differently, but they're doing exactly the same thing. They're just choosing how we organize these folders over here. So you'll see that right now it's set to status, client, matter number, and matter description. And what that means is we have inside the Faster Suite folder, status folders, client folders, matter folders that are named by matter number and matter description. So if that doesn't work for you, we have a bunch of presets here that you can choose from. We can use things like practice area, responsible attorney, anything you want there. Or if that's not specific enough for you, or you don't find a good preset in there, you can actually click this pencil icon to customize it, just like you can with FasterDrive. So you click the pencil icon, you get a field here that you can now type into, and you can click this little ellipsis button to drop down a list of all of the tokens that you can use. So we have a bunch of fields here, again, practice area, originating attorney, responsible attorney, all kinds of stuff here. So basically we separate folders with slashes, and anything that is not a token from down here, not inside these curly brackets, like this period space right here, that's just going to show up exactly how we type it. I also will mention that Outlook doesn't like periods in folder names, so FasterMail is going to convert periods into dashes like so over here on the left-hand side. But basically we've got matter status ID, period space matter status, 1 dash space open. That's what it's going to show up like. We separate the folders with a slash, client name, slash matter number dash matter description. And that's just exactly how it's going to organize that stuff over there. So if you want to get really customized with how you organize these folders, that's how you do it. I'm just going to leave it like this for now. This setting I'm going to skip over and come back to. The rest of these kind of apply more to exactly what we were just talking about. So when a matter folder has a long name, in FasterDrive, we historically ellipsized things, or I guess we still do ellipsize things because Windows has an actual limit to the file path. So we try to keep folder names short so that we stay under that limit in Windows. In Outlook or in FasterMail, we brought that setting over in case you do want to use it. However, it's not as necessary here as it is in FasterDrive. So right now, the default is ellipsize it if it's longer than 50 characters. And you'll see over here, like this folder name is pretty long, so we cut it off at 50 characters just so it's not too long. We can always set this up to 150. There's really no downside. I got a message here that says the sound went off. Are you guys able to hear me? Go ahead and type into chat if you can hear me or if you cannot hear me. Okay, looks like most people can hear. Terry, I'm not sure what happened. It might be a sound issue on your side. If the sound doesn't come back on for you, we are going to be posting this webinar no later than probably tomorrow in our webinar archive. So shoot me an email at help@faster. Well, you can't actually hear any of this stuff. I don't know why I'm talking here. Give me just one moment here. I'm going to reply to. Oh nope, it looks like she did leave. I'll just follow up with her afterwards. Sorry about that, guys. But let's go ahead and continue. So we were talking about ellipsizing the folder names here. So again, there's really no downside to using a longer folder name. You can set it up to 150 characters. It's just going to make it, basically display the whole folder name, which usually is probably what you want. But if you want to shorten it, you can just leave it at the default of 50. The next one here is just, first name, last name, or last name, first name. The default is last name first. You can change that if you'd like. If it makes more sense to organize by first name, you can do that. Now, even if we were to change all of these things, FasterMail is not going to reorganize immediately like FasterDrive does. So FasterDrive, it's just using virtual folders. That stuff doesn't actually exist anywhere. And we just use that to kind of organize stuff, and it can just basically change them on the fly. In Outlook, when we reorganize these folders, it actually has to move the emails inside your email account and create, actual physical folders on your email server. So that is going to take a little bit of time. It's also going to take a little bit of effort for your computer to do that. So instead of doing that constantly, which would just really overload your computer, by default, we do it once per hour. So if we change these settings, within about an hour, you'll see those changes reflected in these folders over here. You can set that to once per day or to just never reorganize if you would like. But the default, again, is once per hour. Now, even when that happens, actually, let's skip down to this part. So we have this Clean Up Outlook Now button. If you want to make those changes appear immediately, you can click this button, which we also have here under Mail, Reorganize Emails. So if you wanted to make those changes happen right away, those buttons you can use to do that. But the next part that I wanted to cover is even when we do that, FasterMail is designed in a way that we don't ever want it to automatically delete anything unless you specifically tell it to. So when we reorganize our folders here, let's say we change this to remove the matter number, it would take the emails that are inside this folder, it would create a new folder that would just say Arson of 4 Sheds, and it would move all of those emails into that new folder. Now, it is not going to delete this empty folder that is left behind unless we specifically tell it to. So when we reorganize everything, you could end up with like duplicate folders or folders that are just completely empty. If you want to get rid of those, you can manually delete them in Outlook, or you can do something like this where we check this also delete empty folders button and then click Clean Up Outlook Now. That'll go through and actually reorganize all the emails and delete the empty folders when it does that. Again, that's available under Reorganize Emails up here. When I click on this, we'll have the option to also delete empty folders. So those are the options for cleaning those up. Again, I guess I haven't said this, but it might be worth just every so often going through and doing that reorganize manually and deleting the empty folders just to make sure that these folders over here stay clean. Also, if you ever change these settings, you'll definitely want to do that the first time going back through here, just to make sure everything gets put in the right place and we don't have a bunch of extra clutter in there. But that really covers the organization structure there. The next thing I wanted to cover is I guess this setting up here, what Outlook account we save it to. We have a fairly common request to basically make every email that you preserve available to everyone at your firm through Outlook. And with our defaults, like our default settings or the way that you would normally have Outlook set up, that's not possible. The only way to basically have access to these folders would be to have this email account configured in Outlook. So if you wanted access to someone else's emails, you would need to put their email address into your Outlook so that you could actually, go in here and view this folder for them. Now everything is available in Clio, but it is just usually going to be a lot easier to get to stuff through Outlook. So really that's the situation that I want to cover with this setting here. So you'll see when we save it to the following folder, we're going to save it into the Outlook account that sent or received the email. Meaning, if I send or receive an email from as@fasterlaw.com, when I preserve that, it's going to go into this folder. If, even on the same computer, I send or receive an email from office4@fasterlaw.com, when I preserve that email, it'll move it to this separate FasterSuite folder here. So it's just going to basically relate the email back to the email or the email address that sent it or received it. Just to reiterate there. Now, this setting is configurable. So I can say I always want my emails to go to a specific email address. If we click this dropdown, it'll just give us a list of all the email addresses that we have configured in Outlook. So you'll see I have as@fasterlaw.com and office4@fasterlaw.com. So that way we can just always use the same folder. Where this becomes really useful is for just exactly that situation I described. Every person at the firm wants access to every email that is preserved through Outlook. Now, the best way to handle this would be to create a shared email address. You can use an existing email address like a paralegal's email address, but that's not going to be what we recommend, and I'll explain why in just a little bit here. But basically, first step, we're going to want to create a shared email address. So I went ahead and created one. It's I think it's fasterlawshared@gmail.com, which I'll add it to Outlook here in just a moment. But you could create a Gmail address. You could add something on your firm's domain, shared@lawfirm.com, something like that. But basically, we just want an email address that we're not going to be sending emails from. So we're going to go into Outlook and actually add that email address to Outlook here. So basically, every user would do this and get this shared folder added to their Outlook. So we go in here. I'm just going to briefly kind of quickly cover this. We'll go to Info, Add Account. And Outlook's going to search for accounts. In a second here, we'll just type in the name of the account and get logged in. But basically, it's going to add the folder down here on the left-hand side, and then we'll just select that as the folder to save emails to, regardless of what email account sent or received the email. And if everyone does that, then all of those emails just all go to that one folder. I think it's fasterlawshared@gmail.com is the name of the one I just set up. Sorry, I didn't run through this here when I was running through my steps. So I didn't want to add it until I actually did the webinar here. Anyway, you might have to go through some of these steps of like logging into Google or wherever you have something went wrong. Sorry, give me 1 second. Let me make sure that that email address is the correct email address. fasterlawshared@gmail.com. That is correct. Okay. Looks like I won't be able to add it. I don't want to have to troubleshoot it right now while you're all watching. But let's just pretend that this one here is our shared email account, shared@fasterlaw.com. Basically, we just go in here to settings, say I always want to save to that shared@fasterlaw.com email address. And we're just going to hit save. So now if I go into my inbox here under as@fasterlaw.com, and we say I want to save this MailChimp email, and we preserve it. When we do this, let's just save it to that same folder, Aaron Aronson. I'm going to hit save. We're going to see it move out of here, but then we're going to see it, instead of going to this FasterSuite folder like it normally would, it's going to move down over here. So under Aaron Aronson, Arsenal 4 Sheds, there's that MailChimp email that I just saved. So basically everyone would add this email address, which again, we wouldn't want to be sending emails from, and they're going to select that in their settings here to move the emails to that one. That way everyone can just go into this folder to grab all of the emails instead of going into their individual ones or having to go to Clio to add the folders or to view the emails. Now, I've mentioned a couple times that we probably don't want to send emails from this account. That's just because of our prompting settings. You know, if someone sends an email from that account, we could potentially get a lot of prompts for like everyone at the firm, since everyone is going to have the email address in Outlook. So if you do want to use like a paralegal's email address or someone else's email address to file all the emails to, just make sure you configure your prompting settings to filter out any of those things that that person would be sending that you don't want to receive prompts for. Otherwise, you're just going to get probably tons of email prompts that you don't want. So again, yeah, that's just really the one situation I wanted to cover there, which is the most common one. If you ever set this and you want to change it back, if you just delete everything out of this field, it'll set it back to the default, the account that sent or received the email. But yeah, that covers really all of the organization settings that I wanted to cover. The last thing here is save plus new versus save plus new. This will be fairly quick. I just do want to point out the difference, because if we go back into our settings, you'll see we have save plus new defaults on the left-hand side, and then we have time entry here. Now, you would think that when we do an email preservation and we hit save plus time, that this is where the information is going to be pulled from. And for the most part, that's correct. However, we do have under Microsoft Outlook another save plus new tab over here. So what's the difference? Basically, the difference is that these settings, the default subject line and the default message, these are things that happen very specifically for email preservations that don't really work with the way that we do all of our other save plus time entries. So if we were to like go to a note and do save plus time, that would work just fine with the settings from save plus new defaults. If we go to an email preservation and do save plus time, the defaults that we put in here don't all work. So we basically just created a second location specifically for email preservations here. So this is the subject line and the description that it will pull for save plus new entries when we're doing an email preservation. So if you're creating like a new note, it'll use this for the subject line. If you're creating a new time entry, it'll use this for the description. And we also have these drop downs for all of these tokens that we can add for those as well. So this is where we're going to configure just those things. In save plus new defaults, these are going to be the defaults for anything that we, like if we do a new time entry here, you'll see that this pulls up all of those defaults that I had there. We've got the activity code, the custom hourly rate, all of those defaults that I set under this are going to show up there. Most of that stuff will show up again for the save plus time on emails, but just basically this stuff over here is not going to. So that's why we configure it in a different place. If we do like a new note over here, it's going to pull up our defaults for new note there. So really, and also if we were to do save plus time, then it's going to pull up our time entry defaults. But again, emails work a little bit differently. So we have these specific settings just for save plus on email preservation windows. So I just wanted to briefly kind of cover that. Hopefully that made sense. I know it's confusing with two separate tabs there that say the same thing. But all right, I know I was talking pretty fast. I knew there was a lot of content to cover, so I was trying to just kind of power through it. Sorry if I lost any of you guys. Again, this is going to be posted in our webinar archive, but we did make pretty good time. So let's go ahead and move on to questions, which it doesn't look like we have a whole lot here. Michael, Los Angeles is a chilly 55 degrees. You feel my pain. I bet you do. It's pretty cold over there. Not quite the below zero that I think we're getting over here, but probably fairly comparable, I guess, when you consider the norm. So let's see here. We have a question, it looks like, Cloud Drive versus Outlook folders. Is there a way to truncate a client company only, not the matter number or description, when creating a folder structure? Have some really long company names as clients. It would be helpful to shorten that portion of the folder name. Unfortunately, there is not a way to do just the client name. You would have to do either the full folder or none of it. One thing you could do is just abbreviate the client's name in Clio. That might not be an option. You probably want the full company name in Clio, but if you can abbreviate in Clio, just for like the actual client name, you might be able to create a custom field on the client, like, unabridged client name or something like that. But then if you use the actual client name is the abbreviation, that'll be shorter. that could be a potential workaround. But to answer your question, you do have to do either the whole thing or none of it. All right, that looks like our only question. So if I get any other questions emailed over or anything like that, I will respond to those in our webinar archive. But a couple other things that I like to point out just at the end of each webinar. We do have a free trial of Faster Suite, 7 days. It'll give you full access to everything. We don't collect credit card information or anything like that until you actually decide to purchase, so it's not going to automatically sign you up. Also, anything you do using Faster Suite gets saved into Clio, so nothing is lost if you decide not to use it. Here's our webinar archive. So all of our past webinars are here, and if you missed any portion of this webinar today, then you'll be able to find it here in the future. So you can always refer to it then. If you like Faster Suite, you think these webinars are helpful, tell your friends, spread the word. They will thank you when they find how much time they're saving and effort they're saving working with Clio using Faster Suite after they start using it. Also, again, the webinars, if you find them useful, if you think they're helping you become a more effective user, let others know to come and check it out. And then for anything you guys need, help@fasterlaw.com would be where to reach us. Customer service, tech support. If you guys have any ideas for future webinars, definitely drop us a line here. We're running kind of thin on ideas. But with that, let's actually take a look at what's coming up here. So next week, we've got on the 29th, migrate your documents to Clio. Just basically the whole pipeline of creating documents, all the way up through filing them. So that'll be a good one. The week following, February 5th, we're going to be looking at automating your drafting process. And actually, I apologize. Migrate your documents to Clio. Wasn't paying attention. That's going to be covering the migration tool in Faster Suite, the import folders tool here. This one here, automating your drafting process, is the full pipeline, start to finish of a document. I apologize. I wasn't really thinking there and just knew what I was going to say, so I mixed them up here. But migrate your documents to Clio, import folders, and then automating your drafting process, basically the full lifespan of a document. The following week, on the 12th of February, we're pretty close to Valentine's Day, so that's kind of our Valentine's Day special. Clio and Faster Law, we love each other, and we're calling this a day in the life. So that's going to be basically the life cycle of a matter, opening the matter all the way through closing the matter. And we're going to be working in Clio and Faster Suite, just basically covering the things that most firms do most of the time with matters. So kind of like the 80-20 rule, 80% of the time you use 20% of the features. So we're just going to cover that really general stuff, broad strokes, to kind of show how the matter process goes in Faster Suite and Clio. And then the week after that, on the 19th of February, we've made some changes to our firm-wide settings. So I'm going to do just a webinar on our group policies. We've really enhanced them. So they're just a lot more powerful now. It's a lot easier to share your settings between computers. So on the 19th, we'll be dedicating the webinar to our new setup there. So if you like sharing your settings with other users at your firm, that would be a good webinar for you. But that's it. So I guess thanks for attending, you guys. Today's episode, again, was number 6, Advanced Faster Mail Training. I definitely appreciate you guys coming. Spread the word. We love to see new faces here. But you guys have a good rest of the week. Enjoy that weather if it's warmer where you are than where I am. But this is Andrew Suter signing off, and you guys have a good rest of the day. Thanks for coming. Bye.